Both Northwestern and Nebraska stand at 5-2. But there are completely different feelings, I think, about both of these teams surrounding both the Wildcats and the Cornhuskers, despite them having the same record. So this will be a noon game on FS1. Nebraska opened up as an 8.5-point favorite. The line came slightly down to Nebraska minus 7.5. Northwestern is playing the traveler, and the Huskers are playing the host. I believe there is a lot of optimism around Northwestern and praise for David Braun as a head coach. Before I continue, liking the video, watching the video all the way through, and commenting your thoughts down below are the best ways to support the channel, as they help push me into the algorithm, help me to receive a larger paycheck that I can use to reinvest in producing elite analysis for you all. Subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, sharing the video around, and supporting us in other ways that you can find out via the description are other awesome ways to support our operation at College Football with Sam. We are becoming the best. We want to be the best. Thank you all for making that possible, for guiding Northwestern to this 5-2 start. And the fact that they're tied for third in Big Ten standings right now is absolutely hilarious. That is one of the funnier and cooler and more admirable stories of any Big Ten team this year, is that Northwestern's coming off a shutout. It's their first 5-2 start since, I believe, 2015. And that was, a decade ago. And for Nebraska, there are feelings of pessimism, anger, and confusion at the 5-2, 2-2 start in Big Ten Conference play, where they are reeling off a Friday night humiliation 6-24 final score in favor of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. For both of these teams, a win here means bowl eligibility, which for Northwestern would be huge, and honestly for Nebraska it would be huge too. I'm not going to lower their expectations. That would be wrong of me to do. They still need to win 8 or 9 games for the year to be anywhere close to a success, to be a success. However, they have to, after the game against Northwestern, the remaining 4 games are USC at home, traveling to UCLA, traveling to Penn State, and hosting Iowa. This is the easiest game. This is the easiest game left on Nebraska's schedule. It just is. So they have to win this. This is a must-win for Nebraska. Probably a must-win in a certain sense for Northwestern as well, given what Nebraska is coming off of, given how they looked against Minnesota, and the fact that after this game, Northwestern's remaining games, I believe, include, not in any order, but at Illinois, hosting Michigan, hosting Minnesota, and I forget who their other game... Oh, yeah, Friday night trip to USC. That you're dead the minute you arrive if you're Northwestern. So must-win spot for both of these teams, and I want to talk about Northwestern first, as they are the road team. So Northwestern started off the year, blowout loss to Tulane, win over Western Illinois, FCS school, and it was a bit of a struggle too. Lost to Oregon 34-14. It was 34-0 at one point. Stone, quarterback Preston Stone, in that game, I think threw 0 touchdowns and 6 or 7 interceptions. And until the Purdue game and all of his other games, he was perfect in TDI-INT ratio in Northwestern's 4 wins before their win over Purdue, where I watched part of that game. Very impressed with Northwestern's defense. That offense is rough. It actually reminds me a lot of their 2023 team. That's what this Northwestern team reminds me of. The 2023 team that took advantage of a schedule that was a little bit easier than anticipated. They lost pretty badly to the good teams they had to play, lost games early, but they picked up momentum as the year went on. They took advantage of some teams that were disappointing. So they beat Wisconsin and Madison when they were worse than I think about anyone expected. Did something similar to Penn State a few weeks ago that ultimately got Franklin fired. I've been impressed with the coaching job David Braun has done, and no matter how the season finishes out, I don't think that he will be fired, given the start they had and some of the wins they had. I mean, they've already had 3 Big Ten wins. They did, I think, a better job against Oregon than most teams will do all year, and that even some teams in the playoff would do if they had to travel to Autzen. At least, they held Oregon to 34 points, tested them a bit in the trenches, scored some points late, even though it was in garbage time. Not a lot of teams can say that. Rutgers, for example, can't say that. They were down 56-3 at one point and lost 56-10. Trips to Nebraska, USC, and Illinois, and then hosting Michigan and Minnesota will be tough. But is one of those games winnable? Well, according to FPI, they'd be favored over Minnesota neutral field. They're only a 1-score underdog to Nebraska. They'll probably only be a 1-score underdog to Illinois, or close to that, maybe a 2-score underdog. And as for Michigan and USC, they'll probably be 2-score underdogs there, maybe even 3 to USC. So odds say they'll probably win at least one more game and go bowling. And that's very impressive. What I am concerned about with Northwestern is that they barely have a positive points per play margin. Very similar to Minnesota. You have a winning record now, but you've won a ton of close games, and against the great teams, competent teams you faced, you have been absolutely owned. So you are just an average FBS team. You are a below average, maybe even bad Power 4 team. I'll actually give Minnesota a little bit more benefit of the doubt here because they do have more talent to work with. And that win over Nebraska was impressive, even factoring in the fact that a lot went right for Minnesota in that they played their best game all season long. That's the best I'd seen them all year. And for Nebraska, it was one of their worst performances. I would actually say, not just offensively, which was pretty bad, but defensively, too. That was the worst their secondary had looked all season long. Northwestern loves to turn it over, and they don't exactly force turnovers either. So they have a negative 0.7 turnover margin per game. That's on Preston Stone for throwing picks and coughing up the ball. It's also on Northwestern's defense for not forcing a lot of turnovers. Bless me there. Northwestern allows over 6 yards per carry from their opponents. I do not think that they are that big or physical up front. I think the strength for Northwestern relies in Aiden Hubbard, for example, their top defensive end, and some of their defensive backs that I like. So for Northwestern, you're talking Fred Davis II, Braden Turner, Robert Fitzgerald, Gardner Wallace, Mac Uleyan, preseason great middle linebacker. Don't know exactly how great he is right now. A forced fumble, 3 picks, 34 solo tackles. I'd say he's pretty good. He'll be tested in this game, though, by tough runner and Emmett Johnson and trying to get to quarterback Dylan Raiola, who does hold onto the ball too long and doesn't have a ton of time in the pocket, but also has made some pretty amazing plays off script when protection breaks down. Northwestern is good at running the football, though. At least I would say relative to the talent they have, and they don't give up a lot of pressure on the offensive line. I think their addition of Martez Lewis, who's their starting right tackle, was smart. Caleb Tiernan is a future NFL tackle. So they have NFL tackles. Griffin, is it Wildy or Wildy, incoming transfer from South Dakota State, is on pace to potentially hit 1,000 yards. And if he stays through the bowl game, even more likely that that's the case, as 513 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. I think that Northwestern's offense does have some substance to it, at least here and there, and that combined with what they have defensively, I think gives them a shot in this game. Is it a huge shot? We'll have to see, because Northwestern, in theory, does struggle to get pressure. They struggle to dominate the lines of scrimmage, and they struggle in run defense. In that regard, they're similar to Nebraska. I'd actually say they might even be worse in stopping the run. But Nebraska is pretty poor at stopping the run themselves. And more importantly, they're pretty poor at protecting the quarterback. So Nebraska is probably an above average good Power 4 team. They are, to put things in perspective here, I believe they are in between Iowa and they're not better than Illinois after Friday. They're what Illinois is. Them and Illinois, I think, are pretty equal. Similar to what both teams were last year. I just think Illinois is better coached and Nebraska probably has better talent, is the way to put it. But from a power ratings angle, I think Nebraska is a similar team to Illinois. Different strengths, different weaknesses. Coaching's different. Special teams are different in favor of the Cornhuskers this time around. But in a power ratings angle, if you put them together and faced off neutral field, the line would be very competitive. Nebraska, their win over Cincinnati on a neutral field is aging pretty well, although that was more of a home game, even though technically neutral site. And honestly, they're probably at Cincinnati's level too, given how close that game was. In ESPN's FPI, I'll check this live right now. Is Cincinnati rated ahead of Nebraska? No. They're rated about 4/10 of of a point lower than the Cornhuskers are in FPI, which I think about tracks. They're about what Illinois and Nebraska are. Cincinnati is. Those three teams, I think, power ratings wise, are pretty similar. They have some really good non-negotiables and really good players, and I think they all have talented quarterbacks, but they have some different strengths and weaknesses. Nebraska beat Cincinnati. They won all of their non-con games, blew out Akron, blew out Houston Christian. I think analytically, the power ratings got a little bit too much juice from those wins over the garbage teams. And Nebraska, obviously, if you listen to some of Rule's halftime speeches and the vibes at the time around the team, he wanted to run up the score there. Against Michigan, a lot of things in the trenches are exposed. Michigan didn't even play all that well. I think Michigan played much better against Washington, for example, than they did against Nebraska. Michigan still won and controlled the game really from the second quarter onward. Nebraska struggled against Michigan State, struggled against Maryland, had to come back from behind after Raiola threw 3 picks. And at Minnesota, Raiola didn't turn it over as much, but Nebraska surrendered a historic 9 sacks to the Golden Gopher defense. So looking at the Cornhuskers here, I think that their skill positions offensively are strong, but the offensive line is terrible. And I think some of the mechanics about Raiola, while he overall is a strength, I think his mechanics play into opponents who can abuse Nebraska's pass pro. So Maryland, I don't know why they couldn't exactly do that. They did get some pressure. That's why some of the turnover stuff happened, and they did get a sack. But Minnesota did a really good job, I think in large part in coverage. And because of that, Raiola, instead of getting the football away or going down to maybe a check down route, or I don't know exactly what's going on, because Nebraska in some pass protection metrics is giving him, the required 3 to 4 seconds to throw, which is pretty good. But he's not getting the ball out quickly. And while they do often give him some time, there are also often plays where one of their offensive linemen completely misses an assignment on a blitz, doesn't get picked up, and, he just goes down because he has to. Otherwise, he's going to take a big hit. Their success rate passing, thanks to Dane Key, Ja'Cory Barney Jr., and Isaiah Hunter, is approaching 50%. It's a 49.2%. They're 22nd there. A key statistic for this game is that Nebraska allows 4.2 sacks per game if you take out the FCS game. So even including Akron, but just taking out Houston Christian, against FBS opponents, they're allowing over 4 sacks per game and many more pressures. That's on Elijah Pritchett. That's on Gunnar Katula. That's on the entire offensive line. It's also on Dylan Raiola, too. It is. So you can't fix that midseason. You have to adjust. You have to make changes to your strengths to compensate for that weakness. That's how bad of a weakness that is. Their secondary is fourth in yards allowed per dropback, only allowing 4.45. In terms of success rate and expected points added allowed per dropback, they're dropping pretty quickly. And I think that's because something I said in the Michigan State game that wasn't proven right then, but I think maybe I was a bit too early on, is this secondary's good. It's great. But was it ever going to be elite given the talent it had? And I don't think so. I think that maybe part of the Michigan State game was due to the weather. Maybe it was a mirage. There were Michigan receivers who couldn't catch the ball but were open and who were faster than those Nebraska DBs. And for Minnesota, it was the same thing, except they could actually catch the ball, make some contested catches, get open in space. Drake Lindsey, I think maybe because of that extra year and because of how his offense is, and also because, he was playing in Game 7. Underwood was playing Nebraska in Game 4. He was able to quickly get the football out and anticipate where the holes in the zone would be, or which man would be beating which defender. I think Sear Wright and Andrew Marshall and Deshaun Singleton in that secondary are great, but they're not locked down in the same way that Alabama's or Ohio State's secondary is. So there is some pause for me from Nebraska overall defensively and offensively after that game, but I've had some pause at different areas for the entire season, so I don't want to overreact to the Minnesota game, and I don't think people should either. That's why I think Nebraska wins, but I am also going to hedge on this and say that Northwestern covers. Northwestern is a confident team. I think that they are well coached to this point in the year, and they have capable players on defense and capable pass rushers too. So that's not a good matchup. I mean, Michael Kilbane and Aiden Hubbard and Anto Saka. So Kilbane is 2.5 sacks. Hubbard is 2.5 sacks. Saka has 3. I think that with the rotation they have there, they could eat up Nebraska's tackles, I think. And I would predict that to happen, actually. A huge part of the reason why I'm picking Nebraska to win here is their special teams. They're more talented, and they're also at home. So I can't pick Nebraska to lose. I think, actually, if they don't win in a close game, I think it's more likely they win by more than a score. They win by 2 scores or 3 scores or something, solely because of the talent mismatch. And Northwestern has had some luck bounce their way. I mean, they just shut out Purdue 19-0, and their points per play margin is barely positive. Well, Nebraska's is above of a, tenth of a point per play margin, which is, basically the sign through 7 games of a good team. Noon game, it's going to be sold out regardless because Nebraska fans are that awesome. I think Nebraska's going to move on to 6-2, and that USC game, given it's a night game, it's going to be the blackout. That is going to be the Super Bowl for Nebraska. The Michigan game was shaped out to be the Super Bowl. I sort of, just due to matchups and how Michigan, at least at the time, I thought it was going to be them or Penn State who was going to be the toughest team in the trenches for the Cornhuskers. Now it's Michigan or Iowa. I just think stylistically, the USC game always meant more for what Nebraska is as a program right now than a Michigan game where you still have a talent deficit, a size and trench deficit too. Nebraska wins. I do think Northwestern covers here, though. We'll be curious to see if I'm proven right on that, or if Nebraska wins by a wider margin, or if Northwestern pulls off the upset somehow, some way. There are going to be very dark times in Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's look at the matchups before we get on out of here and end this segment. So for Northwestern and Nebraska, I think that the Wildcats have an edge on the lines of scrimmage here, but it is not a big enough edge to take advantage of some of Nebraska's weaknesses. So Northwestern should be able to run the ball on Nebraska, I think. And I do believe they'll do that better than Nebraska will run on Northwestern, but I do not believe that Nebraska is going to have this porous rushing offense performance against Northwestern. I mean, they ran okay in between the tackles against Minnesota. It just wasn't good enough for them to constantly stick to it. And then you add in the sacks and the pressure and the offensive line losing confidence throughout the game, and it folded up like a lawn chair. The entire offensive operation did. That's why they got shut out in the second half. For the Wildcats here, I think they have an equivalent staff to Nebraska, and I think they can match the Huskers in the trenches, but I struggle to see a world where Preston Stone somehow outduels Dylan Raiola, even if he is much better protected. And that was a big part of the reason why Minnesota and even Michigan were able to beat Nebraska's, because Underwood didn't put the ball in harm's way outside of that one fumble. He had the rushing score, some other key runs. They utilized him getting that long run to open up lanes for the running backs, and he had an okay day passing the football too. And for Drake Lindsay, he was able to really find a lot of holes in between the zone, put the ball perfectly to make sure his man got it and not the defender on top of him or close to him. He had a really accurate and good day. So on top of winning the trenches, you need good QB play to beat Nebraska, because Nebraska's a good team. And I just don't think Northwestern has great quarterback play. Looking at the standings here, Nebraska needs this win, and they need it to probably be convincing if they want any hope of going to the playoffs, because not rebounding here in a big way makes beating USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Iowa look unlikely. It makes beating even two of them look unlikely. A win here and a dominant one is needed for Northwestern. If you win this game on the road, I mean, you can find a pathway to 7 or maybe even 8 wins. I mean, if you can win this game, you can beat Minnesota at home. You could beat Illinois on the road. You could beat Michigan neutral field if you were to go on the road and somehow win this. So it's a big game for both of these teams. I know that none of these teams right now are ranked. I don't even think any are receiving votes. I know Nebraska was, 25th last week. They're not receiving votes at all. So it's a prove it spot for both of these teams, and that is why I love this game. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your analysis and thoughts down below so I can reciprocate my thoughts with you in the comment section, and check out anything on these end screens that are up here, whether it's a recommended video or playlists for teams that I'm talking about in a preview, prediction, or a reaction. Make sure to hit the notification bell on those, scroll through them, and watch any suggested videos if you are interested. Thank you for helping college football with Sam become the best and the biggest college football brand and channel on YouTube and other social media platforms. We will reach that one day because of your support.